Scarlet Nexus, a creation of Bandai Namco, a game that is an action role-playing experience in the third-person perspective. It's available on the PlayStation, Xbox and PC. Bandai have a long lineage of games, some of which you may know, whether it be the Tales games, Tekken or Ace Combat. With such a vast array of experiences to pull from, this new game touted a brain-punk game providing a unique kind of combat. So let's see what this game is all about. Without further ado, this is the Bearded Breakdown with the Scarlet Nexus review. Once silky smooth animations with a quirky cyberpunky element and anime art style, look no further than Scarlet Nexus. To be honest, I'm not surprised by the visual quality of the game. Judging by the latest Tales of Arise trailer from Bandai, they have really stepped up their efforts in the graphics department. Having good fidelity when the game is standing still is one thing, but having a plethora of visual effects resolve themselves on screen all at once and still remain as smooth as Geralt in a bathtub as Yennefer parades around him is another. This game does an excellent job of using its art style to bring its animations in combat to life. The very first time I used psychokinesis, I admired as the particle effects were flying around effortlessly, gracing my screen with such poise. This admiration only increased with the addition of even more powers. Despite there being literal rainbows worth of colors on my screen, each stands out and is clearly defined, which makes the flow of visuals a pleasure to watch. As a fan of anime, this was eye candy in Super Saiyan mode. I've been waiting for an anime style game with the slickness of a platinum action game that isn't an arena fighter. The devs clearly wanted to emphasize that each element, i.e. fire, lightning, ice, and so on, has its own identity. Take lightning, for instance. It has an over-exaggerated animation, with lightning bolts flying jaggedly through the air in such a way that you think you're watching Pikachu let off a thunderbolt. Fire rages through the air, igniting the enemies, and even more so when igniting the enemies who are covered in oil. Despite the epilepsy-inducing light show in every fight, each aspect of visuals is clearly carved out so you can see and make out exactly what's happening on the screen, which is easier said than done, believe me. The level design is a mix between cityscapes and post-apocalyptic settings with a variety of color palettes to suit. You'll visit frigid mountaintops, abandoned hospitals and hyper-futuristic churches, misty temples, and a few other locales. Some of these settings are so grandiose in their design that you may just stop in your tracks so you could admire the stunning design work. It reminded me of the first time I cast my eyes upon Ghost of Tsushima's work and world for the first time. As I gently walked through the tall grass area, the sun radiating on the horizon, grazing the grass ever so gently, I found myself releasing the control stick and just soaking in the environments. Will you experience moments like that in Scarlet Nexus? Yes, but not that often. They are there, but I obviously have to give a shout out to the design team, really pushing their creative limits with this game's level design in certain chapters. So the environments are pretty, the combat is visual cotton candy, but how about the character models? It's nothing to write home about, unfortunately. Most cutscenes are played out in a comic book-like fashion, with only the character's jaws moving, which can be hilarious at times if you focus on it during super serious conversations. There are some animated cutscenes where you do see some emotion from the characters, but it's limited to the art style, and I also don't expect a complex God of War level motion capture for a $50 game. And let's not talk about the NPCs, it's laughably bad at sometimes, and other than that though, it's a beautiful game, especially when the more cyberpunky elements kick into gear, changing your surroundings into a neon lit landscape, providing an awesome backdrop to epic battles and phenomenal visual effects. Right off the bat, you are given the option between two characters to play. Yurito, our male protagonist, and Kasane, our female protagonist. Each character has their own story arc, which ranges about 60 hours in total if you play both sides. They encounter the same story from different perspectives, and they share the same power, which is psychokinesis. The controls for these characters are as follows. You have a regular attack button, a special attack button which involves an AoE move that helps you recharge your powers, as well as a jump and a dash. You then also have the controls that control your power. For me playing on PC, I was on an Xbox controller. It was the right trigger and left trigger, and you also have bumper buttons which allow you to access other abilities given to you by your teammates. So for now, let's move on from the basic controls, as most people who live under the sun can understand how it works. What I want to expand on is how your powers and the powers of your teammates work. As I mentioned earlier, you have psychokinesis, which allows you to throw objects and manipulate them to achieve various goals, whether that be breaking down doors, riding solar panels like a surfboard, or literally smashing your opponent's heads in. Not joking, by the way. It's not just the power that makes the experience with the combat awesome, but how it interacts with your melee combat. For example, imagine you're midway through a combo and an enemy launches a projectile at you. You'll get a prompt on screen that allows you to intercept that projectile and launch it right back in the face of your enemies and then continue your combo. It's incredible and so fluid. There isn't any of the jank that you potentially find in games with the same price point. Your regular combos can be intertwined with a power, creating an absolute barrage of carnage, decimating anyone who stands before you. And if you do this just right, you can keep the combat flowing the entire fight. The system is truly a marvel, and then that's only expanded upon with the relatively large skill tree. All in all, some of Bandai's best work, and I haven't even spoken about the teammate powers yet. These teammate powers add a whole new dimension to how the fight plays out. There's a character called Kyoka, who is my elected anime waifu for this game, who allows you to create copies of yourself, duplicating any attacks you make. Combining that with a teammate that gives you crackling electric projectiles and suddenly you're Zeus with a lightning machine gun. Want to slow down time? Well, you can do that too, and before you know it, there's a visual symphony of thunderbolts littered across the screen, smiting everything in sight. But perhaps you wanted to play more defensively? Well, there's a teammate who can make you go invisible, and another that can make you invincible for a short period of time, of course. So yes, open up with that sneak attack, which is an automatic crit, turn on invincibility, and then use a fire sword, because why not? This excellent confluence of skills allows for so many combinations and fighting styles. You can unlock even more abilities by embarking on bond missions with said teammates. And as you increase their trust in you, you unlock a slew of different abilities and buffs. Before you know it, you'll be wielding almost every element like some kind of wizard rolling perfectly in D&D. Enemies evaporating all around you. Holy cow. This game's combat far surpasses that of so many AAA titles, or supposedly AAA titles. The pendulum-like flow to the combat, combined with the crazy slew of abilities, makes every fight exciting and refreshing. This is made even better by the fact that our heroes have unique finishing animations that are unique to each type of enemy, which is the cherry on top of an already coma-inducing cake. Honestly, I could talk about combat all day. It's just good. It's amazing, in fact, just trust me on that. So let's move on to how non-combat gameplay works. As I already mentioned it, I'll start on the bond missions. As you grow alongside your team, you'll grow closer to them, unlocking these bond missions which serve to push the narrative and unlock new abilities with that teammate. What I really liked about these missions is they're not just fluff pieces. They actually feed into the main story really well. Every character is vibrant and unique. They have an incredible depth to them which you can only discover if you pursue these relationships. Sometimes not all is as it seems with these characters. You'll have your favorites, of course, but I highly recommend doing them, if not for the story pieces, then the badass abilities you get at the end of these missions. Other than these missions though, there are maybe 5 interesting side quests, one of which involve you watching in-game TVs at specific times. These times are given out on Bandai's website just because I guess. The rest of the side quests are go here, kill this, go fetch this for me, and they give rewards that can be bought at a shop. So yeah, there's that, I guess. I wouldn't recommend these generic side quests, as the rewards aren't worth your time, and when you have a backlog of games, life is just too short to waste on side quests that give me a basic healing item. In what's described as an era of brainpunk, we are visiting a world where most people in society have extrasensory powers which provide them with superhuman abilities in order to fight mutants called the Others, which have originated from a space anomaly. As such, society has set up an organization called the OSF, aka Other Suppression Force, a group designed to directly battle the Others with supernatural powers, often scouting young teenagers to join their ranks and allowing volunteers to do so too. That is the premise. You choose one of two characters, each with their own backstory and viewpoints. The story grows into a complicated beast past the initial prologue, so I won't talk about it directly anymore. Instead, I'll talk around the story, trying to give you my impressions on it as a whole. As far as RPGs go, Scarlet Nexus does a great job of delivering a great yet convoluted story. There are many moving parts in the middle of the story that require you to do some manual work in order to understand the world a bit better. This usually comes in the form of bond missions, or playing the story from both characters' perspectives. What really impressed me was how fleshed out the story was. I was constantly surprised by how well new parts of the story were introduced, seemingly well crafted and directed in a way that allows for natural understanding to meet curiosity, which then evolves into a deeper understanding once you submerge yourself into these characters. Each character is incredibly well crafted and you never really know their intentions bar a few. One particular character who is portrayed as a typical muscular brawler type by JRPG and RPG standards, evolved into a sensitive and incredibly empathetic individual, with deep-seated insecurities coming to light. At one point I was like, whoa, they nailed the crafting of this character in such a way that it closely resembles how an actual person may react in that situation. It made me care about each and every one of the characters, even the more unsavory ones. She didn't. Of course, some relationships and lines are totally over-exaggerated, and some lines were downright cringy. But as a whole though, if we ignore the cringe factor, it's an acute look at how an actual story might be if we had their circumstances forced upon us. There are flashes of a full spectrum of human emotions, and although the facial animations don't help that at all, you can definitely see where the writers were going with this. The voice actors did a great job in their roles, making these characters believable. You can actively see the work that Bandai is making in their storytelling departments. When I see such ear-to-the-ground writers having their work put out there, it serves to act as a beacon of hope for future games like Tales of the Arise, a game which I'm immensely excited for. That being said, it's not all good. There are some points where ludonarrative dissonance rears its ugly head, creating moments of confusion as to why a character is acting a certain way that is then explained much further down the line. This fact is only exacerbated when Yuito, the male protagonist, acts erratic at times, which is then again explained at a later point in time. Go into this knowing that not all is as it seems, and that you should take things with a grain of salt. There is a deep story here, but you need to actually be paying attention and not just coast through the game. It's easy to see the people who rush through the main story and they miss out on major story beats. It's evident from the eclectic reception that this game has already had. It's crystal clear who has rushed and who hasn't. My advice is savor the story. It is well written, it just needs your time. Something that I know we are all short on. Ultimately though, you'll have a satisfying conclusion to the story if you stick with it. The game ran incredibly well for me. I was running the game at 4K, uncapped frames, and I was almost always at 120 FPS with all my settings at max. Very rarely I had dips, and that was only when I had multiple light shows going on at once. I'm currently running a 3080 and a 10900K. I also tested the game on 2K and 1080p and saw no issues on that resolution. I did notice, however, that the draw distance is a little noticeable, and there's also some pop-in, but it was so infrequent for me that I barely noticed it. The level design is fairly linear with some more open maps, and the action remains fast-paced and exhilarating. It's impressive that there were no major frame drops. Overall, for me personally, this game is a polished experience with very few minor issues that in no way, shape or form hindered my ability to enjoy the game. If you did want more data, more specific data, you can always go and check out performance-specific reviews that can help you get a broader picture on any technical issues that may be happening within this game.
Check your route, Yuito. You're off the path.
Beautiful. Jazzy vibes, check. House, check. Classical, check. Real instruments, check. Funky J-pop vibes, check. Rock music, check. There is something for everyone. I usually set the music at 75, unless it's particularly epic, i.e. Skyrim, Halo, Final Fantasy, Nier, and I guess I just added Scarlet Nexus to that list. Although not technically an epic, it was tonally correct and had me bopping my head up and down as I traversed the levels and battled my enemies. Each area has different music with long drawn out soundtracks. I noticed very little repeating and most of it was quite catchy. I found myself humming the melodies when I stepped away to make food or do some other real life activity. And then we have our throwing chunks of debris at enemies, which sounded visceral and brutal at times. And the weapons felt a little tinny and JRPG, but I guess that's to be expected. Voice work was tremendous. Usually I play native Japanese games in Japanese, but I rolled the dice here and enjoyed the English voice work. There were plenty of vocal dynamics to assist the lack of facial animations in the game, and selling the player on the emotions that the characters are feeling was really well done by the voice acting. I felt like they went all out with the voice acting. There are some notable voice actors in this game that are littered through other games, including that one guy who is literally in every other anime game. No, seriously, if you just listen for that one guy, he's practically everywhere. But great work on the sound design. I really enjoyed it, especially the intro. Unfortunately, I can't play that here for copyright reasons, but I definitely enjoyed it and I recommend that you listen to the whole thing when you boot up the game. Hey guys, thanks for watching the review. As always, I enjoyed making it. I'm just going to say it. Scarlet Nexus, great game and an excellent price point. The combat in this game is better than some other AAA titles. You know the ones I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention them here. It was a fun and engaging experience from start to finish, and I definitely got my money's worth. It's about 60 hours of gameplay if you play both sides, so that's the male and female protagonist. 60 hours for a $50 game, and you're going to love this game if you love anime. And even if you don't love anime and you're unsure about the kind of stereotypes or anime tropes, you'll still get something out of this if you happen to want to dive into the genre of RPG, JRPG animes. Guys, it's been a pleasure. I really love this game. I'm going to give this one a green light. For those of you who are new to the channel, stick around. On the next slide, I'll show you exactly what that means. If you like the review, feel free to leave me a thumbs up. And if you love the review, why not leave a sub? It really helps the channel. Guys, next up is Legend of Mana, a PS1 game. It's going to be a remake and it released on the same time as Scarlet Nexus. I've just started it. I think it's amazing so far and I'm going to be really excited to bring the review to you. This was the Bearded Breakdown and I'm going to see you next time. Thank you again for tuning in. See ya.